All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of my podcast. I'm Katy Gostaspi, and welcome to the Katy G podcast. And the mission of my podcast, as I always say, is for us to really realize that we are great as women lawyers, that we can be even greater, and most importantly, how are we going to bring this greatness through our intellect, through who we are as an identity, not just as a role as a woman lawyer, to the world through a brand. So, why the KTG podcast? Two main reasons. I really care about humanity deeply, and I want us all to see how great we really are and to be happier as a practicing lawyer. And second reason, hey, I'm just like you. I struggle just like you with those feelings and those thoughts and self confidence and stress and anxiety and whatever else happens as a result of being a professional and a busy woman, mom, daughter, you name it. And some days are good, some days are bad. And this podcast really helps me learn as well from our guests. So today, speaking of our guests on the Women Lawyers Making a Difference podcast, I want to welcome Julie Fershtman. Julie is an equity shareholder with Foster Swift, Collins, and Smith in Michigan. Welcome, Julie. My pleasure. And the other thing you should know about Julie, and I'll let her tell you all about herself in a second, is that she was president of the State Bar of Michigan. And she was back then one of a handful of the fifth woman president, to be specific, in 80 years of the State Bar of Michigan. And I think that's a fantastic pedigree. And if you just look at her resume, she has done so much with the American Bar Association, something we have in common, and she has just had a, I'm not sure even noteworthy makes it fair, but a stellar career, and the amount of contribution in speaking and writing is unparalleled. I mean, I'm looking at a 12-page CV, Julie. So what should we know about you? Tell us about how you became a lawyer and what you're up to and your story for our audience.
Oh my, I'll keep it brief. My father was a lawyer. He had a general practice. He had a solo practice, occasionally with a couple of other attorneys. So my beginnings in life were watching a lawyer in action, meaning a phone ringing at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. Most people wouldn't want to be a lawyer, knowing that you had to spring into action as he did. He had to get his clients out of jail in the wee hours of the morning. But it was fascinating. The ability to help people, sometimes in the most vulnerable times in their life, was really important to him, and it was important to me to see the difference. And even though I didn't take that area of practice as I became a lawyer, since I represent businesses and insurance companies, and as I'll try to have time to share, horse owners and businesses, I still respect the fact that we as lawyers can do so much to make a difference for people and communities. And that to me just keeps fueling my interest in the practice.
Fantastic. Yeah, I saw that. You do a lot of work in equine law. That's amazing to me because I think it's a very niche, but there's something to be said for niche practices that
Yes.
ties in, as I always work with my clients on, to people's personal stories of who they are. So let's just start there. Why equine law? How's that tie back into who you are?
It ties in because, frankly, I was a frustrated young associate who didn't really know if I made the right decision. When I was an associate, I suffered like many associates out there do when you are struggling to keep your workload. Work comes in from every different direction. One partner doesn't care that you're busy working for another. Everybody's got to
Amen.
be served. And the work was interesting, but as an associate, you took what they gave you. It wasn't until 7 years out of law school that somebody said to me, you might want to think of an area of law practice that you could find personally fulfilling and interesting and maybe develop it. And I always liked horses, and I owned a couple as a kid. Didn't have any when I was in law school. I was too busy with law school. But I began to learn about equine law, and it became truly a labor of love and a passion. So, as a young associate, still at that point, about 7 years out of law school, I made it a point to learn everything I could. And then I began to write, and then I began to speak. And to this day, I have a practice that includes part with equine law. But it's kind of an interesting opportunity for anybody to find an area of interest and look for a way that it might intersect with the law. Because if you can get work in that area, work, frankly, that you may have created by educating people, it's absolutely a blast. It's a fun way to
So,
practice.
so well said. There's so many lessons there. We haven't even gotten into the lessons you want us to know. Maybe that's one of them. Whoever gave you that bit of wisdom was so wise, and I don't know how many years ago it was, but I'm guessing you're over 21, much like me. Well, I'm 49. Maybe you're 22 or something. I don't know. Um, but that bit of wisdom really hasn't been around for that long. My dad gave me that bit of wisdom, but his method was, well, if you wake up in the morning and you're not happy doing what you're doing, please reconsider it. And that's what I did when I stopped practicing securities law all those years ago. But I think there's so much to be said for who are you? And that's why I do what I do. The brand is about who you are as your identity. And then your role is as a lawyer and a mother and a daughter and whatnot. And I think we get those confused. And, for 7 painful years, I couldn't figure out who I was if I wasn't a practicing securities lawyer until I figured all this out. And now I teach people without the pain. But somebody said to you, hey, if you like that, if that's part of your story, then bring it in. And because as you educate people, they naturally, organically get that passion from you and they become your clients. And so, well done for listening, right? And that's another skill set. We're so busy running, we're not listening to that wisdom that comes through in very small ways. Maybe that was just a statement in passing that you could have missed, but you didn't, right?
True. And it was good advice. But if there's one lesson I would share, it is if you expect results from what you do, if you want to make a splash in an area of law, if you want to become or try to become a household name, as I tried to do with equine law, you really do need to expect extraordinary commitment, extraordinary hard work. And sure, we know that lawyers just running with the pack every day, keeping up with our workload, keeping our clients' matters tended, that takes a pretty good pace. But it takes that extra effort, I found, to go beyond and to let people know that there is an area of practice of equine law. And it took effort to write articles. Once a month, I made it a commitment for decades. I was going to write a brand new article and offer it up to a magazine. And I did. But to do that meant that my Saturday mornings or my evenings were spent writing. And then when speaking engagements were offered to me, that was effort on top of the usual work. But that
That's
helped because it was a way of communicating and getting the message out that there is a need for equine law.
That
Um,
is really good advice. If I had to summarize it, it's, time. Time is really something that gets to us, right? We're trying to build and practice and develop business. In fact, I was just on a call with a lawyer who was saying the same thing to me. How do I juggle this? If I hire you, how am I going to make this work? But it's what you're saying, it's commitment. There's never going to be enough time, and it depends on what you commit to, and taking that and blocking it on your calendar and saying Saturdays once a month I'm going to write this article. It's about having that intentional brand and plan. It sounds like to me that you said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to focus on this and I'm going to intentionally put this down as my goal and I'm going to make it happen. And it's about what we focus on that we achieve. Fair?
Fair, but
Yeah.
remember that our lives intersect with others. And if
Mm,
there's anything that I have shared with women lawyers, it is make sure you have a really good support system, that your partner, significant other, spouse shares your passion in such a way that when you do take off that Saturday morning to write your article, or as I did, I've written books, when you take a little bit of extra time in the evenings, weekends, whenever to write your books, somebody is understanding your commitment, isn't nagging you, isn't making you feel guilty. Recognize that you need that support network because I truly believe the work life balance concept for me is a concept, it's a theory, but it is so difficult to achieve it. You really do need somebody to help out. And I've been very lucky in that regard. My husband is awesome.
true. So true. As I was telling you before we started recording, I interviewed Judy Perry Martinez, past ABA president, uh, and last week, and that's exactly what she said. That support network. And here's what I found. This is such a good concept that you're bringing up for our listeners. With the pandemic, which is why I really wanted to focus on women lawyers. the pandemic, our support is waning because we don't feel like we're worthy of that support. We've got so many stressors of the working from home and now hybrid models and the kids going back to school with masks, without masks. I interviewed somebody who said, I worry daily about my child going to school without being vaccinated. This is not a conversation on vaccines whatsoever. That would be an 8-hour podcast. But it really is about finding that support network that works, but finding it and looking for it and knowing we are worthy of that support, right? Because we support so many other people. And then when we don't get that support back, you can't flourish. You can't even produce. You can't feel like you can sit down Saturday mornings and write that article because what happens to the rest of the world if you're not in control of it, right?
Right. Well, the other comment I would offer is really appreciate that support network, because for
Mhm.
somebody to make that extra effort, for my husband to pick up my daughter from an after school program, and he's a lawyer too, although he's not a litigator like me, means that he has to plan and shuffle his day. So I've always been a believer of showing gratitude, expressing it, saying, I really appreciate what you've done. And that carries over, frankly, to just about everything. And it might be that during my presidential year at the State Bar of Michigan, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I hid it from everybody except certain people at the bar. And finally, I told the board. But when you've been through something like that, fortunately for me, that was 10 years ago, it really makes you think. Some reassess their life and decide, I don't want to practice law. I want to focus on me. In my case, it just made me more I guess, grateful that I'm here, that I survived, and that my support network saw me through my bar leadership, which I still kept going, my work, which I still kept going, and everything. And so gratitude, never taking anybody for granted. And even my law firm partners here recognize that when I call them just to ask a tidbit of advice, like I have an appeal here, what do I do under this rule? And they give me an answer. I have a stack of cards from a well known coffee company, and I just zap one off. It's a $15 gift card, and I do it all the time when people give me advice and help me out. It's my way of saying, I really appreciate what you've done, and I know your day is busy, and you gave some of it to me. So I'm always showing gratitude for when people are helpful, because I respect the fact that we're all so busy. And when somebody takes that time to be of assistance, I always want to let them know, hey, that was an extra effort and it meant a lot. I do it with gift cards with people around the office. And at home, I tell my husband all the time how much I appreciate everything he does. And I hope that more people would do that, because we can't take people for granted. We can't take life for granted.
Well, I really want to say thank you for being so wise, but really having self awareness around this concept, right? I think that's why people don't do it. We're not bad people. When people, please don't listen to this as the audience and go, "Oh, I don't do that. I must be awful." And look how great Julie is. She is just putting self awareness around this and really choosing to focus on it. And maybe you say, well, because she had breast cancer. And I'm really sorry to hear about that. I didn't know. But look, you're here and talking about it. So congratulations.
Thanks.
But it's those challenges that we go through that make up our life, that if we don't learn something from it, that's the problem, right? But things happen and we're supposed to learn. So this is what you learned. And I started walking around 2 years ago telling people I appreciate you instead of I appreciate you, I don't know, picking up the dog or whatever. And at first it was very uncomfortable. I don't know how much you've played around with this, and listeners, try this for yourself. And people would stop when you say I appreciate you. I wasn't used to saying it, and people were like, you just appreciate me, and for what? And I'm like, I just appreciate you. And now I put it in all my emails, and it's become, I see it floating around more, and it warms my heart because you're just really recognizing people's greatness when they don't have the time to do it for themselves, and for all the things that are big and small. Gratitude, I think, is a beautiful brand. It's just attractive and magnanimous. That recognition of others just for being themselves boosts people's self-confidence and brings them to self-awareness, I think, right, Julie? Like, hey, you recognized me, I must be worthy, or I should just stop and maybe pass that on to somebody else. So that's a fantastic lesson. I really appreciate you for so many of the things you just said, for keeping going at the Michigan bar in your role when that obstacle came up. Let's not give that short shrift. Like, what was your motivation for just carrying on?
Well, I think being the fifth woman president of the State Bar of Michigan, at that point, I was the 77th president, was enough to make me want to keep going because I didn't want to let down all the women lawyers in the state of Michigan. And also, let's face it, to get to the point when you have been elected the State Bar president, you've had decades of commitment and a lot of service and work. And that was probably why I had not an attitude of gratitude at the time, but it was a war mentality. It was a fighting mentality, and it was, I think, helpful because I didn't let it get to me. But I know everybody's different in how they deal with it. So
Yep.
through chemo and everything, it was just a matter of trudging through. So I was fortunate that it didn't affect me that badly that I could do that.
Fair enough. Yeah, you're right. Everyone is different. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh, woe is me, I have my first world problem, and how embarrassing now listening to Julie talk about how she dealt with breast cancer. Everyone's difficulty, their degree, there's no degrees in difficulty. It is what it is, and we are who we are. It's just about the humility and yet the grace of saying, hey, give me support. I got this going on. But I found that as women lawyers, I know I personally am not good at that. I don't raise my hand and say, help. In fact, in just today's weekly blog that went out, I was talking about how years ago I was on a plane because I used to travel so much before the pandemic, and I had hurt my shoulder and I had to put my bag in the overhead. And the flight attendant said, don't check this, just ask somebody inside to put it above. And I remember sweating the whole time getting on the plane, going, how will I bring myself to ask somebody? I mean, it's just ludicrous, right? And then I just turned to the guy behind me and said, hey, can you put this up? And he didn't even think twice, right? And here I was like, oh, I'm putting somebody out, and I should be able to do this by myself. And maybe none of the rest of you listening have ever gone through this, but I'm guessing you have, because we as women just do, right? So good on you for that lesson. What's another lesson, Julie?
Well, I think we've covered the ones that I really wanted to share. It's the hard work and the results that you get from it. It is the attitude of gratitude and the comment on work-life balance. And that we all have a different way of approaching it, but I don't know if my life and all the things that I've wanted to do really speaks to work-life balance. There's just been a massive amount of work, but we try and accomplish everything we can with the time we have.
Well, let me ask you about that. I always call it, I personally don't like the word balance when I'm talking about work life, because then I envision myself on a tightrope trying to walk. And my big thing is my research on stress and self confidence, right? So I'm always trying to get every stress down. So if I'm trying to walk on a tightrope balancing, it stresses me out. So I look at it as a harmony, like an ebb and a flow. You really do have one of those resumes. It's like, there, how in the heck did you get all that to balance, harmonize, whatever you want to call it? If you had to put it in one sentence, how'd you make it work? And why
I
do all that?
it really it really I think a lot of what we do and what we prioritize and we want to put our effort into depends, I think, on, in some respects, how we view ourselves. And in my
Mm.
case, I do take being a lawyer very, very seriously. And the development of a clientele to me was such a priority that I was willing to write the articles, get out there and speak. And I've been in 29 states. I was willing to do that because I had a goal and I had to achieve it. And if it meant, as I've mentioned, working when my husband and daughter are sleeping or on some of the weekends, to me, it was the most important thing. So while others read books and maybe go play tennis, I was doing my work, trying to get some exercise in, of course, too. But it really was an important thing. And I will offer another comment. Along the way, people have told me that I was never going to succeed, be it certain family members who thought when I explained I really wanted to make a go of an equine law sub practice, they thought it was the silliest thing in the world. And I was told that I was just spinning my wheels. In a way, working extra hard was a way of showing them, see, I'm getting results, because there were results. And then Jay
Mm.
Foonberg, as you know from ABA circles, he was quite the force to be reckoned with when he wrote How to Start and Build a Law Practice. I met him at an ABA meeting in the early 90s, and I told him what I wanted to do to establish this sub practice area of equine law. Jay told me point blank that I would starve. He said, "You want to do horse related law? You're in Detroit, Michigan. No, it's not going to work." And now Jay apparently has spoken about me at some of his seminars because it was the hard work that I had to do to prove them wrong. So we don't always have a challenge like that of somebody telling you, no, you can't succeed, you can't do this. But I did have it happen a couple of times. And I think that was the extra effort of watch me, the
Ah, the
extra impetus.
psychology of people is fascinating, right? And that's really what it all comes down to, whether we're selling ourselves or selling our practice or growing some aspect of who we are and what we're doing. It all comes down to the psychology of it. And being told no, as lawyers, we're one to persevere and love a challenge and competition. There is a certain stereotype and it makes sense. And so being told no is a great way of saying, watch me, as long as it doesn't come at the toll of our health and our well-being. So I think it's a pushback and a stubbornness, but I found it works well in my life when it's matched with a grace and an ease of, I'm going to do this because it makes me happy. And along the way, if it helps you see that it is possible, not that you were wrong, right? You're not trying to say Jay was wrong, but you're saying, let's just show a different perspective and a different possibility, because then it doesn't come with so much anger and resentment and grit versus just, okay, thank you, and that's motivation right there, taking it and turning it on its head. So good for you for doing that. I really appreciate what you said. And I like that you use the word hard work. I started reframing hard work for myself. Tell me what you think about this, and started calling it, I was raised. I'm an immigrant, a refugee, and if you didn't work hard, you didn't prove yourself in this country, and you weren't valuable, and you had to be valuable because otherwise, why are you here not proving your value? I get all that, but then I discovered, hard and work going together makes my work tenable, and I don't like it. So I just really love what I do, and I just refuse to look at it as hard work. In fact, a lawyer client just said, I want to work with you because I want to work smarter, not harder, because I want to get it done and not have to kill myself and have time to enjoy with my family. And so I want you to really listen to what Julie's saying, listeners, and evolve that for yourself, because she found that balance. And so hard work can mean hard, but I'm guessing it can also be fun because you enjoyed it, right, Julie?
Absolutely. I believe in the old saying, if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. It sounds
Amen.
so silly, but I really think it's true. I truly have enjoyed being a lawyer, and this is my 35th year, which is,
Congratulations.
I guess, it's been a while.
It's an iterative process, right? It's reinvention. I never think of it as retirement because I'm like, people say, talk about retirement with me. I'm only 49, but I'm like, what would I retire from? I love what I do. It's my purpose. It's who I am, much like you, I'm guessing. And then if I retire, I might as well die, right? At that point, because it just doesn't make sense. I'm not trying to be morose or, weird, but it is what it is, in my opinion. So there's something to be said for that. So anything else before we move to part two, Julie?
No, I think we've covered quite a bit.
All right. So in part two, I ask my guests to bring a challenge or an issue you're dealing with, and let's coach you through it because the audience will learn so much from you. So what's going on in your world? What's on your plate?
Lots, but after 35 years of practice, and I'm not planning to slow down, I've had my busiest couple of years since last year and this year. Part of me is thinking maybe it's time to try a different phase of practicing law. Maybe it's time to focus on maybe developing a mediation sub practice and doing some
Okay.
mediation on the side. What does it take to do that? How do you convince judges, well, not judges, but lawyers, that you can be truly neutral and try to work with parties? Yes, I know there's educational programming that we have to go through to be a mediator, but I also think it takes some other type of focus in letting fellow lawyers know that you can do this and you can help people and you can try to help them achieve a goal. So Um, that's a challenge I'm thinking about right now, and it's just based on being a lawyer for as many years as I have and getting to know a lot of people. Is this a worthwhile effort? Is it something to steer clear of? Is it a good idea to sell your abilities, not to prospective clients anymore, like I used to, and I'm still going to, but to focus on selling your, I guess, abilities to fellow lawyers? It's a different angle, and the question is it worth it?
Excellent, excellent question. I love that question. It's such a helpful question for you, and of course, for so many of the audience members, I would think. So, you said a lot there that's about other people and convincing other people. I would say the first place to start is with your own recognition of why you want to do this, right? And why why do that? Because it's like anything else in my world of branding. What is that story? What is your motivation? Once you're clear and you know it, it's just intentionally putting it on a roadmap, which is my specialty. So let's do that. Like, why did this come to mind? Why is it a priority now? What is your skill set that's natural for you around it that makes you good at it? How do you see it serving a population that you want to serve? Right? Because you're trying to convince me as your audience that I should take you seriously and take you as a credible mediator. But I got to know how you're going to serve that community well based on your skills. And then in all of this, as you really think about it, your passion and your purpose will come through and you'll be able to, it's a feeling people get around you. All right. So I did an ABA. I do a lot of ABA CLEs, but I did one CLE and it's fresh in my mind because I was just talking to a partner at the firm where I met this gentleman and he called me right afterwards and he said, "You're different. My gut told me you're a different kind of a coach and I want to talk to you about hiring you." And that's what I'm talking about. Nothing I said or what I did. It was just that feeling, the emotions that are triggered. So, Julie, I would say take some time, one of those Saturdays when you'd be writing that article, take a couple hours, sit somewhere where you can center and focus really. Get into your right creative brain, okay, which is as a lawyer, we're always in our left linear analytical brain. That's what makes us good lawyers. A plus B equals C. That's how we're trained. The creativity and the vibe and the essence that sits with people and makes them remember you and say, "Oh, she's on it. She'd be a great mediator. I can just tell," right? Those words. That comes from your right creative brain, which is about emotions and something you can't put your finger on. So it's hard to tap into that without, wondering the left linear brain, is this right? Is that wrong? None of that resides there. So listen to some music, maybe get into your body, maybe dance a little if that's your thing, or just take a red pen and doodle something to trigger the creative side. And then sit there with a blank Word document. In nature would be great. I think in Michigan, you guys are still safe in September and October to sit outside and just let the answers come. Why do I want to be a mediator? What is this next iteration in the Julie 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 brand really mean? And how do I put it into words? And then just let the words flow. Just type free form. Don't censor yourself. Don't edit it. Don't bring the left linear brain in. Just type whatever comes to mind. This is just between you and your keyboard, right? See what comes up and then stop, look at that, put it away, come back maybe a day later, an hour later, 48 hours later, read it again. Does it resonate? What can you add? What can you take away from that? Then that really becomes the what it takes to convince other people, because maybe you don't feel like you need to convince yourself, but we all need that boost of backing for why I have this wild, crazy idea. If subconsciously, this is what's going through people's minds, not consciously, right? And maybe you're an exception to that rule, but this is the truth of it. Everything that I talk about is the subconscious processing of data that we go through. And I want it to become conscious so it's intentional and within our control, especially as women lawyers when we've got so many other things vying for our control: children, carpool, spouses, cooking dinner, all that stuff, right? So look back at it and say, this is my why, that I want to do this next phase. And here's my skill set that lends itself. And here's part of my story. And here's how I could be of value. And then who do you want to reach out to and share this message with? So there's an intentional plan behind it. And then shortening the message, but not making it so well versed that it sounds canned. But you're a natural at this. Anytime you've been in a speaking position, like being president of an organization like the Michigan Bar, you've spoken enough and you've gotten to understand the sound bites that are you, so that you can share them naturally and organically. And then the audience will naturally take to that because you have a plan. So what I'm saying is, I don't want it to be so much about other people controlling your destiny with this plan. I want it to be about you sharing the information on your terms with the right audience because you've convinced yourself. Does that make sense?
It does. It really does. Yeah,
So, can you take those next steps?
I will. I like the idea of sitting outside and just having a blank screen and free flow thinking. And I think you're right. If I can convince myself, it'll help me, first of all, decide if this is a goal I want and the sincerity of my belief that it's a goal. And I think it'll also convey that sincerity will carry through as I begin to develop my plan of action on this area of
Yes.
practice.
I don't want anything to be random or reactionary for us women lawyers, for anybody really, frankly, but focusing on women lawyers because we're triggered by so many different things wanting our attention. And if you can just give that little bit of time to yourself, it's self-care too, which we don't do very much of. And the creativity is astounding. I'm always working on less is more, meaning the less I do and the more I sit still, the more efficient and effective I am, and the greater results I can bring to my audience because I'm clear, and that clarity of my brand comes across and resonates and makes an impact beyond what we can possibly believe. So I am so excited for this new iteration and new reinvention of your career. I It's probably like one of the last things you haven't done, frankly, looking at your amazing resume. And I hope that was helpful. And I look forward to reading and hearing from you what you've done with it, taking it to the next level. Anything else on that?
No, thank you. I
You're
appreciate your
welcome.
insights and your way of approaching things.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So, Julie, tell me anything else you want to leave us with? Any other thoughts before I let you get back to your very busy day?
Unfortunately, I think we've covered quite a bit, so I don't think I would add anything. Unless
Fantastic.
you think there's an angle that we need to include in this, because I know you're taping it and you can edit things. I don't think so.
Okay. And is there a way for us to find you and to reach you, to connect with you? How would you like
Sure.
us to do that?
Sure. Actually, it leads to a suggestion that I have. If anybody here has developed a niche, try to line up a website, a domain name. Just lock it in if you can. And I have several domain names in one of my areas of practice. I'm a business litigator, I do insurance litigation, but then I also do this equine law. So one of my sites is equinelaw.net, and promoting my books is equinelaw.info. But my law firm, which is always the best way for someone to get a hold of a person like me, is Foster Swift, all one word, fosterswift.com. My name is Julie Fershtman, and if you go to the firm site, look at the F's and you will find me in there. I also have FirstmanLaw.com, but you'd need to spell my last name, and that's not the easiest thing to spell.
Hey, listen, Julie, you're talking to a girl with the last name of Goshtovsky. I know we both have an SH in our name, but I think Firstman is much Ferstman,
That is
everyone.
correct.
I know you can do it. So thank you, Julie, for your time. Thank you for your contribution to the law, to the state bar, to the ABA, to varieties of practice and thinking that we wouldn't otherwise have access to, and to really showing us how to balance the feminine, the masculine, the professional, taking care of ourselves with things that come up, little blips on our screen like breast cancer. We're just going to treat it that way and move on with our life because that's the important part. Thank you
Right.
so much for being a contribution. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
And thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Catchy G podcast series, Women Lawyers Making a Difference. If you've got a woman lawyer that I should just meet and introduce to the rest of the world, We're a community here where we support one another. As Julie said, we support our growth, we support our humanity in being able to identify ourselves outside of our role as lawyers so we can make a bigger contribution. And until next time, thanks for listening, and Kati G out.